Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, it is I am the one and only Silver the Hedgehog here, and once again, I am back for the likes of the Mexi Toys videos once again. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back for some more of Let's Play of Zelda 2, The Adventure of Link, for the Nintendo Entertainment System / Famicom Disk System for those of you who lived in Japan, or if I like to call it, FDS for short. So, last time, we've essentially managed able to complete the 6th palace in the game, despite the fact that we haven't exactly explored through every single rooms for the sake of the forms of the 6th palace. But that's just mainly because I just want to get that palace done and over with, and in addition to that, not only we somehow fully leveled up our, you know what I'm saying, with the next level up as far as I can usually describe it, despite the fact that it's been about 6 days ago since we've last played this for sure, but I'll explain more details about that once we get this process going. So because of that, yeah, today for this video is about the fact that, well, also exponentially speaking though, I don't think it's a possible way that we can able to actually get ourselves our game over anytime soon. Because of this though, today for this video is potentially speaking though, we're about to hit back onto the forms of the 6th palace in the game again, except now I'm about to go after the final item we can probably obtain. So because of that, and in addition to that, if you couldn't tell already, we've already maxed out our magic and life, but the only thing we need to consider able to actually realize that the only thing we need to level up right now is of course the attack power. So, but again, it does require 8,000 experience points, which originally though, I was expecting to try to able to actually level up or trying to able to actually grind so many of those experience points in the last video, but I just couldn't be bothered because I don't want to get a game over again, because obviously if I do get a game over, I'm essentially going to be sending all the way back to Hyrule Temple, and because of that though, we have to do this whole entire tedious process again. So, and also I apologize for that capture card decides able to glitch out for a moment, but hopefully I'll try to fix that at some point during the forms of tomorrow's case. I mean, sure, no matter what though, is about the fact that I can't believe by saying this is that we actually almost nearly at the end of the game already. Because of that though, we've already managed able to place the last crystal in one of those specific statue parts, so relatively speaking though, we don't need to necessarily try to worry about the forms of frustration anytime soon, until if we make our way towards the end game. Because of that though, yeah, we'll probably have to able to save that for later, and because of that, hopefully I'll try to likely try to get some more experience points so I can able to reach myself level 8 for the sake of the forms of the attack power. So because of that, hopefully it should make things a little bit more comfortable, and on top of that, without any sort of frustration involved. Oh, in addition to that, since that we've already somehow managed to complete the 6th palace in the game so far, this also means we can pretty much guarantee we can able to actually get ourselves the final magic spell in the game. And by the way, that is the most mandatory thing, by the way, if you really want to beat the game, which as a result, I think it's probably best able to save that up and doing at some point, well, as soon as we able to actually come across into an old man once again. And in addition to that though, is about the fact that we'll save that particular topic and during at some point in during the forms of tomorrow's video, as far as I can remember. So, but again, it's been about 6 days ago since we've last played this game for sure, mainly because, if you couldn't tell already, is that both Sonic and Jewel, respectively, they both have finally managed able to complete their Let's Plays, not just by the forms of Metroid Zero Mission, but also Sonic Frontiers, which as a result, I can definitely see why that Sonic totally needs a break for the sake of the forms of playing Sonic Frontiers the whole way through, and my god, that is the most longest playthrough we've ever done during the course of 2023 so far. Well, that's just mainly because of quite a number of things. First of all, 100% completion, and on top of that, certain S-rank requirements, or to be more specifically, trying to able to complete everything for the likes of the cyberspace stages, and not only that, the entire DLC as well, for its not only Battle Rush as well as cyberspace challenges, and also same applies with the forms of that particular new Coco challenges for DLC 2, and all that stuff, including with the forms of action chain challenges for every single island. And strangely enough though, is that the action chain challenges never seemed able to appear during the course of the Final Horizon DLC update for some reason. I'm not exactly sure why that seems to be the case, but even then though, I'm guessing it's mainly because the main selling point of the forms of DLC 3 is of course multiple playable characters you can able to switch out with. So although you can't able to actually switch them on the fly though, you have to keep on talking to the forms of Master King Coco in order to do it. So even though that's the only drawback I can probably think about it, mainly because I keep thinking about like playing several other games, like for instance there's the forms of I'm not exactly sure what specific game I was going to be thinking about. Mind you, it's been a very long while since I actually mentioned that specific topic worth noting for, so of course I'm not able to keep on equipping, or should I say I should probably keep on using the reflect spell so I can able to actually dish out with the forms of Ku Klux Klan or something like that. I'm not exactly sure what their names are, I have to be honest here. I already know for a fact that for some enemies, like for instance with Iron Knuckle, and as well as the forms of other enemies like Stalfos, and also say applies with other stuff, you know? So either way though, that's as far as saying goes, that's as far as we can able to say about this, I guess. So, and I think relatively at this point in time, is that potentially speaking though, we've almost nearly at the end for the sake of the forms of some couple of Let's Plays, for the sake of the forms of 2023, before we move on to 2024. Now I do have my high expectations for the sake of the forms of 2024, although mind you, we should probably let Maxie be able to save that particular topic when it comes to mentioning that, until when it gets to the point until on the final Let's Play of 2023 for sure, before we move on to 2024, because, well, you should have to wait and see what happens in due time, so, but I digress. Oh, there's a experience points thingy right there, so we can able to obtain that already, so that should be all pretty swell. So, yeah, for the most part, there's not much else I can usually just try to able to talk about this, apart from the fact that for one thing in mind, that Sonic has completely forgot to mention about during the course of the Sonic Frontiers finale video, like a proper true finale video as far as what I meant to say, is potentially speaking though, is that recently Tetris 99 is actually hosting the Super Mario Bros. Wonder theme for its Maximus Cup. So even then though, it only lasts until likely tomorrow or something like that. Oh, and speaking of which though, is about the fact that one thing I honestly forgot to mention about this either, is potentially speaking though, there's also going to be yet another cosmetic character that's going to be coming onto not only Sonic Dash, but also Sonic Forces Speed Battle. And as it turns out, is that potentially speaking though, we're about to be getting Snowdrift Sonic. And let me just say, I love the actual costume, by the way, for the sake of the forms of Snowdrift Sonic. Especially, it's almost like a proper Christmas treatment. Likely also, he still managed able to wear some Christmas outfits, as well as the Santa hat. But the noticeable differences this time around, though, is that he can able to actually wear a Christmas boot this time around. And in addition to that, he also got plenty of snow on these little, like, hair spines or something like that. So that, yeah, that's actually pretty interesting. Now, for what I've noticed on the actual description for it, for the likes of the forms of the Sonic Forces Speed Battle for its status quo, is that potentially speaking though, actually I'll save that particular topic once we're able to, oh no, we have to do with this particular Blue Iron Knuckle again, but again, thankfully though, we are a lot more powerful than the forms of how it does it since it during the forms have been Dungeon 3, or should I say Palace number 3, or Temple number 3, depending on what region you lived in. So, again, I'm not exactly sure of how I'm usually able to actually describe about any of these things. I mean, mind you, thank goodness is that we've almost nearly at the end of the game, so, but then again though, that can wait until at some point until tomorrow's case, so. And I'm almost going to be dying anyway, although I'm not exactly sure why I somehow obtained that key, by the way, although it seems kind of pointless though, because after all, we somehow managed to able to get ourselves our magic key with us, so we can able to potentially try to open up every single doors every now and then. So here we are, we actually obtain the cross item, which I'm not exactly sure what that does, even though let me know in the comments down below to see what that particular item does, because mind you, like I said before, it's been about 6 days ago since I actually have last played this, so, and good thing I did somehow manage to able to choose Reflect spell immediately, because I know for a fact that this particular enemy decides to able to shoot projectiles at us. And good thing we can now able to restore our magic, thanks to the forms of that particular red magic jar that we can able to, like, obtain. So, oh yeah, one thing I totally forgot to mention about is that depending on what version of the game you're playing, either on the Famicom Disk System version of the game compared to the NES version, in order to pick up specific special items on the NES version, you simply just walk into it, and then you can able to actually see this amazing facial expression for Link. Whilst, usually unlike the Famicom Disk System version, in order to able to pick up specific special item, you have to able to crouch and use the actual sword step in order to able to pick the actual specific items up. So, kind of weird though. I'm guessing they function kind of like the same way as the forms of how it does it for several of magic jars you can able to actually pick up with. Although, yeah, that's why I could really try to able to describe about it. Oh, and another thing too is about the fact that depending on what version of the game you're playing on as well, Link's expressions is actually a lot different depending on the forms of what version of the game you're playing. I believe in during the forms within the NES version, if you couldn't tell as what the version we are currently playing on, basically though, Link does able to actually have his mouth, whilst compared to the Famicom Disk System version on the other hand, Link does not have a mouth anywhere, so because of that, kind of a weird change depending on what specific region you lived in, but either way, that's as far as saying goes, that's what I can really think about it. So, yeah, I think we are basically done with this point, especially concerning for the fact that despite I'm almost going to be dying, although, potentially speaking though, before we leave this particular palace for now, is that I need to take care of the forms of specific solutions for now. Likely, for instance, I was expecting to try to able to take down that blue Iron Knuckle, but he might be a bit too much for my liking. So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to leave. So because of that, I'm pretty sure we are done here. So because of that, we can now able to actually do some quite a number of things. Likely, for instance, is that I'm almost at the halfway point in terms of the forms of trying to make our way to 8,000 experience points total. So even then, yeah, let's just go and leave. So yeah, for now, we'll just go in and deal some of these additional stuff. So either way, let's go ahead and make our way to this bridge over there, because I was expecting to able to go there to begin with, but like I mentioned this before, ever since during the forms upon last Sunday or something like that, specifically on the 10th of December or something like that, basically though, we can't go to that particular town because obviously if you enter that particular town for the first time around, basically though, you're expected to able to get hit a lot, especially concerning for the fact that that town has potentially got cursed. So either way, and it's also filled to the brim with monsters and stuff like that. Speaking of monsters though, we can able to actually now go in here, and we have no harmness to it, aside from the fact that there's going to be a lot of enemies involved around in here. So either way, if you enter this particular building right there, then you would able to meet up with this old wizard man, and because of that, we can now able to learn the most powerful magic in the game, or should I say the most powerful spell in the game, known as Thunder. And this actually costs so much magic to use, but if you try to use that, it's pretty much a screen nuke, basically. So because of that, and it's also worth noting for, is that this is the most mandatory spell in the game, because if you don't learn this at all, basically though, you are basically going to get deadlocks. Well, not so much deadlocks, because obviously if you potentially trying to die, basically though, it's about the fact that you can't able to actually just like respawn back into the forms of that specific point or something like that, unlike the first game where basically if you don't have the silver arrows with you from the likes of the forms of when you're trying to face off against with Ganon, well, you're basically stuck, so you have to able to just take a death or something, or just reset the game or something like that. It's hard to explain really, because I know for a fact it's been about a year ago since we've last played The Legend of Zelda on the NES, so, and kind of thinking about it though, since this is our 4th Zelda game we are tackling through for our channel, I'm gonna say I was actually quite impressed with this, despite there are some technical issues, likely also for my capture cards gets like glitchiness sometimes, but regardless of everything else though, like I said before, I definitely need to try to fix that at some point. Especially because concerning for the fact that, well, we've basically almost done everything in the game, aside from the fact that every now and then, if you couldn't tell, I'm actually starting to be able to be focusing on trying to get so many experience points. I think the best area we can probably able to go into, at least in terms of the forms of trying to get some more experience points, is by going to this forest area, and because of that we can now able to actually take on those guys every once in a while, because otherwise, the more you try to beat them, then the more experience points you can probably be able to get. I know it's a bit of a slow process, but trust me, what I'm saying is about the fact that originally though, I was expecting to try to do this off screen, but I think I'm also able to go in and just try to show us ourselves with the forms of the best method when it comes to likely getting certain experience points, at least as far as I'm concerned. So, anyways though, there's also another thing I suppose that Sonic has completely forgot to mention about this as well, is potentially speaking of, is that the Super Nintendo world, well, for those of you who lived in Japan, actually decides to announce there's going to be the Donkey Kong expansion bit. And as it turns out, the actual expansion bit is actually going to call it Donkey Kong Country, which I totally get it for the fact that it might actually feels like exactly the same vibes, not just by the forms of Donkey Kong Country Returns, but also Donkey Kong Country Tropical Freeze. I think it's to be more specifically though, the actual theme is actually based on from the likes of the forms of Donkey Kong Country Returns. So, because whenever I see the actual promotional image, yeah, it seems that Tiki Tong did somehow make a massive comeback after the events of his defeats from the likes of Donkey Kong Country Returns, from the likes of Donkey Kong and Diddy Kong respectively. So, but anyway though, and it's, as it turns out, for the sake of the forms of the theme park itself, to be more specifically with the Super Nintendo World Japan expands with Donkey Kong Country, actually confirms the actual release date for it. And I think it's about to be released at some point in spring next year in 2024. So that should be exciting, especially concerning for the fact that it does manage to contain quite a number of things here and there. Likely, for instance, there was actually the actual, the roller coaster bit, and straight to the point, no matter what though, is that it actually did somehow reference the title of that particular roller coaster, which, as it turns out, it was actually named Minecart Madness, which is actually, kind of thinking about it, is actually a reference to something related to the first Donkey Kong Country game. Like, in one of those levels in particular, I think, if I recall correctly, it was somewhere in World 5, if I was assuming so anyway, or World 6, even though it's been a very long while since I actually have last played Donkey Kong Country. But yeah, that particular title of that particular roller coaster attraction is actually a similar name from one of those levels in the, one of those Donkey Kong Country games, specifically in the first game. So, yeah, it's actually pretty interesting. So, and in addition to that, what I've noticed is about the fact that they were able to actually bring not one, but 2 new wristbands, which also has the exact same functions as the forms of how it does it when Super Nintendo World was first released. So in some cases though, we're about to be getting the Donkey Kong and Diddy Kong themed wristband, and the noticeable differences this time around though, is that normally in Journey forms have been the main Super Nintendo World attraction for the sake of the forms of Universal Studios in Japan, or Hollywood for that matter. Basically though, you can able to actually interact with all kinds of stuff, ranging from, you know what I'm saying, with blocks, clocks, as well as the forms of the actual key coins and stuff like that, and all that particular parts worth noting for. Whilst in the forms within the Donkey Kong Country segment, if you manage to collect those specific collectibles, specifically K-O-G, or should I say, K-O-N-G letters represents Kong letters, then basically though you might able to get something rewarding, which as a result it feels remarkably similar to the forms of how it does in the Donkey Kong Country games. So yeah, it's actually pretty interesting. So because of that, yeah, it's actually pretty cool. So anyways, let's get back into the specific topic when it comes to the forms of Snowdrift Sonic. For the likes of the forms of Sonic Dash and Sonic Forces Speed Battle, basically, for what I've noticed is about the fact that when it comes to the status, At least I'm referring to the ones in the forms of how it does it on Sonic Force's Speed Battle. Basically though, the actual status for Snowdrift Sonic, his speed was actually 10 out of 10, and on top of that, strength was actually on 6 out of 10. However, for acceleration, it was actually 4 out of 10, which I'm not exactly sure why. And in terms of special items though, he does manage able to contain Snowball, Gift Wrapped, and Festive Forest. So yeah, I guess that makes a little bit more sense, because obviously you're able to actually utilize the Christmas themed special items. So despite the fact that you can only carry up to 3 items at a time. So oh well, no big deal though, at least because obviously I'm still basically give up playing, you know, Sonic Force's Speed Battle just because I just keep on getting, you know what I'm saying, a lot of butt-kicked moments here and there from time to time, and because of that though, I just essentially just give up playing that game. And another thing is worth noting for actually, is about the fact that I think, if I recall correctly, that obviously no matter what though, is, well, suffice to say, I think that's as far as we can able to actually discuss upon that point, when it comes to the forms of every single topics worth noting for. Although I suppose, there's only one last thing I would like to able to classify for mentioning about this. I suppose, no matter what though, that I haven't exactly explained any of that, from the likes of the forms have been last week or so. Because, you know, I keep on already mentioning about the forms of the Game Awards ever since in last week. So, apparently though, what I've noticed right from the start though, is that, you know what, there's actually the upcoming Pokemon series called Pokemon Horizons, the series. You know, with the forms of the new animated series, as far as I'm aware. You know, despite the fact that Ash Ketchum is no longer the main focus of the forms of the series, sadly. But as a result of that particular matter though, the only thing I want to classify for mentioning about that is that, potentially speaking though, they did somehow confirm the release date for the American version on the forms of Netflix, as far as I'm aware, is that I believe Pokemon Horizons, the series, is going to be releasing on Netflix on the USA version. It's going to be releasing until February 23rd in 2024. Now, apparently though, since I'm in the UK country after all, apparently though, is that the UK version of Pokemon Horizons, the series, actually, we did somehow manage to able to get the series quite early than I was originally expected, because as it turns out, is that the BBC iPlayer did somehow receive the actual Pokemon Horizons, the series. So, yeah, I thought it was a little bit odd and quite intriguing at the same time. Although, despite the fact that I've never actually watched any of the English dub episodes on it so far. Oh, and another thing too, is potentially speaking though, better late than never I suppose, is that potentially speaking though, happy 10th anniversary of the actual show's release of Rick and Morty, which I definitely heard about the series before, but I've never actually watched any of them, which, as a result, I know it sounds a little bit crazy, because I'm still pretty much used to watching The Simpsons a lot, mainly because, at this point in time, I'm still watching those Christmas-themed episodes of The Simpsons currently. So because of that though, yeah, I've obviously have no idea why, I did somehow manage able to completely forgot about it, but I might try to give it a shot though. But even then though, don't expect for the actual high expectations, I think. Although, it is quite understandable for its popularity, but I might able to give that a shot, so either way. Oh, and another thing too, is you already know right from the start though, is that Chicken Run Dawn of the Nugget has already came out just recently yesterday from the likes of on Netflix. Let me tell you, I had a really good time watching it though, especially, it's not perfect, but at least that's a really great grand return for the likes of the forms of the Chicken Run film series, as far as I'm concerned. Especially, it's pretty nice to see Ginger and Rocky again, but only on the forms of, you know, on Netflix app. So I guess that makes it pretty obvious for the sake of time. But then again, no, I'm probably not going to mention any spoilers for the sake of the forms of for those who have not seen Chicken Run Dawn of the Nugget yet. But I'm sure I will say this right now, I would highly recommend it, especially concerning for the fact that after 23 years since the first film came out, for the likes of the films have been a big screen cinema, and as it turns out, no matter what though, it's so really good. And I suppose the next Iron Man project, at least as far as I'm concerned, The next project they're going to be working on is potentially, though, there's going to be a next Wallace and Gromit movie that's about to be releasing on 2024, despite the fact that currently at the moment they're running out of plaster scenes or something like that. So, oh boy, it's going to be one of those another scenarios with all this disastrous things after the events of 2005. Shortly after, when Wallace and Gromit: The Curse of the Were-Rabbit has been fully released on a big screen on a cinema. But either way though, let's not get ahead of ourselves. So, but even then, yeah, as far as saying goes, that's as far as I can usually try and able to mention about. Oh, there's also another thing I want to mention about this as well. Apparently though, Peach did somehow being revealed as by the films of one of those original designers or something like that. Well, usually for concept art anyway. Well, it was originally planned, but it was scrapped entirely. So, for those of you who don't know, that Peach was revealed by Waluigi's original designer, which, kind of think about it, what is going on with the forms of that particular weird fusion between those specific characters in mind, with all these fan arts and all that stuff? Like, I already know for the fact that Peachette now exists, but even then, when it comes to Bowserette though, or just, I just have no words to say, because even then, well, what I've noticed is about the fact that I just have got no explanations here. Well, at least it was expecting for a, I don't know about you, because it has been about quite a few days since I actually known about the forms of scrapped ideas and all that stuff. Although, because mind you, I'm in the middle of this process of the forms of trying to able to farm so many of those experience points after all. And also, the location I decided to choose, it was somewhere in the forest, and actually, as it turns out, it was right near to the hidden town. So because of that, I highly recommend you do this, because otherwise, if you keep on getting hit by certain, aggressive enemy types, obviously, I highly recommend you able to pop over to, like, if you eventually almost running out of your magic meter, as well as the forms of your health meter, obviously, I would highly recommend you able to go ahead and pop to a visit to, the hidden town, briefly, just in case you can able to regenerate your health as well as regenerate your magic meter. And I think, suffice to say, that would be the final time we're going to be able to pop over to a town, because obviously, since no matter what though, like I said before, we've almost nearly at the end of the game, so either way though, that's saying something, I suppose. Now I suppose the final thing I should probably talk about this is, potentially speaking of, there's actually a mobile game called Lord's Mobile is actually getting a crossover with Shrek. So yeah, that seems pretty interesting, all things considered, which I'm not exactly sure why they go for this decision, but I'm sure it will be kind of interesting to see how that particular crossover is going to play out to be, so... But, yeah, for the most part though, guys, I think that's as far as we can able to actually say for this particular discussion at this point, especially that we've already mentioned about, you know, like I said before, it's been like, 6 days since I actually mentioned something new and all that stuff, but I do know for certain for one thing is that we've already mentioned about the fact that I kind of believe that GTA 6 is finally happening, although despite the fact that you guys have to wait until 2 years time, and sure enough though, it's about to be releasing on PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series X, and I don't know if it's possible for the Nintendo platform anytime soon, but I suppose no matter what though, it's probably not likely going to be releasing on PlayStation 4 as well as Xbox One due to the graphics powerhouse, so at least as far as I'm usually concerned with that particular point's worth noting for, at least, you know what I'm saying. So, yeah, if you couldn't tell already, that's my another game over, because I somehow finally reached its maximum potential. So because of that, I believe that will be the final time we're going to be seeing Game Over Return of Ganon screen, because obviously we are going to be able to approach onto the final stretch of the game. Because of that, yeah, I am fully organized, and because of that, no need to deal with the forms of experience while grinding. So, anyways, with that being said though, we got the endings of this point right here. So join me next time for more of Let's Play of Zelda 2, The Adventure of Link, is that we're going to be approaching onto the final stretch in the game by tackling through the final powers in the game called the Great Powers. So, yeah, wish me luck I suppose. So I'll see you guys until tomorrow. Later fellas, and yeah, just wish me luck, like I said.